In this video, I'm going to show you my technique for painting portraits from a photo. So in this example here, I have a self-portrait I did of myself in October of last year, 2012. And of course, it's from a photo that I took. And I'm not doing any auto painting or cloning, so I'm not tracing it. I'm using the original photo as a guide, or just looking at whatever the pose is, and then from that I'm changing the colors entirely and shading it and doing whatever else I want to it to make it look like a painterly painting. So again, I'm not really tracing anything here. We are, however, going to use this photo as a reference, so at first we're going to use what's there to make a sketch, but then after that we're all on our own. We might look at the image as a reference to get a feel of how to shade things, but other than that we're going to change all the colors and just make it wacky. So normally I would do most of this stuff, whatever I was going to do to my image I would do in Photoshop, but this is just going to be easier if I just stick to Painter in this tutorial. So I've got a picture of myself here that I took. It's not even a really good quality picture. It doesn't have to be great. You just need to be able to see enough detail to be able to paint the face. And oftentimes, if you're going to be doing portraits for other people and you're letting them pick their own pictures, they're probably going to send you something they took on their phone that's not that great. So you're going to have to be able to use your imagination. Like here on the eyelid, I can't really see specific things going on here, but I'm going to have to use my imagination. So a lot of this I'm going to have to fill in. I can't see what my eyebrows look like, just look like a little gray smudge. So it's going to take a lot of interpretation, and that's the good thing. Again, I'm not going to show you how to do cloning or tracing or anything here. I'm going to show you how to use the photo as a reference to make an artistic portrait. And if people were going to do this on oil canvas, someone might give you flack and say, well, this is kind of cheating because you're using the photo. Well, if people were painting this on canvas using a photo, they would just, do something like draw a grid on their photo and then draw a grid on the canvas and then match everything up to that, which is basically tracing. It's just a way harder way of tracing, but you're essentially still using one image as a guide to draw another image. And even if you're looking at someone in real life and you're holding your pencil up to their face, which is what artists do to get ideas of where your different alignments of your face are, that's tracing too. You're just tracing with your mind. So either way you're going to be tracing. So unless you're drawing somebody's face from imagination without looking at them, you're going to be doing some tracing. So don't let anybody give you any flack about how you do this. I would say cloning is the exception. If you're going to clone, all you're really doing is just painting over the image, and that's no fun. So don't do that. Let's try it this way. So first thing we want to do is we want to make a sketch. And if you do want to do anything to your image here, like if it's too light or it's too dark, you can go to Effects and then go to Tonal Control, and you can correct the colors if you need to, or you can go to Brightness, Contrast, and if it's too dark, you can make it lighter or darker, whatever you need to do. Again, this is probably better to do in like Photoshop or some application that's better, but that's good for now. So again, we're just going to use this as a guide. We don't even have to stick with these colors or anything. So I'm just going to go to cancel. I think it was fine how it was. And then we want to be able to make this kind of transparent so that we can see through it, our reference image. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Control A on our keyboard to make a selection around everything on this layer, and then we're going to do a Control X to cut it, and then we're going to do Control V to paste it. So what we did is we selected all, we copied, or we cut and we pasted. So I'm going to rename this new pasted layer Ref, which is just short for reference, and let's put it down below the sketch layer. And then now that we have this reference image on its own layer, we can use the opacity slider to reduce the opacity. So what we want to do now is zoom in a little bit so we can see things, and then we'll go to our sketch layer and we'll use a light gray, and we'll use something like the detail oils brush with a pretty thin brush here, and we will do a quick sketch here. Now, I said we weren't going to trace. Again, like I mentioned, either way, you're going to have to either make a grid or you're going to have to do something if you want this to look accurate, and that's going to involve some form of tracing. So there's really no way out of this. This is just a faster way to do it. So if you want to take the longer way and do it the longer way, if you think that's going to make it look better, do it that way. But if not, go ahead and do it this way and don't have any reservations about it, because you'll see as we move on here it's going to get a lot harder and you're going to have to really use your imagination here. You're not going to be able to trace anymore. So I'm just kind of roughing in where the eyebrows are. I'm not, this is a rough sketch here. This is just whatever I need to put down to know where all these parts are. And again, I kind of have to guess here on some of this even when I'm sketching, because I can't entirely see these details. Most of this, most of the detail is going to be done through shading. So this sketch kind of doesn't really have to be like, really nice looking or anything. It's just going to essentially replace our photograph while we're painting. And if you have two monitors, or you have something like an iPad or your phone where you can put your reference image on a different screen than the one you're painting on, that'll be helpful so that you can see it at the same time. So otherwise, you might have to try to do everything on one screen, and that'll be a little trickier. I don't think I'm really going to, in this example, I'm not really going to do too much on the body, so maybe I'll just really simplify my shirt and just make it like all one solid color or something. So any kind of contours you see that you need to just make little indications of, or if you need to make some kind of light shadows or something so that you remember to shade in these places, do that. And then once you have something like this, we turn off our reference layer. So we won't be using that anymore, with the exception of we might look at it. I'm going to put it over on my other monitor so that I can see it. If you don't have a second monitor, what you can do is you can just have Painter running in a window here like this, and then just open your reference image elsewhere. Just have it over here, off to the side. It won't give you as much space to work, but that's what you're going to have to do unless you have another way to pull up your reference image on a different device. Now, this sketch here is kind of low res. What I normally would have done before doing this is I would have gone into Photoshop and made everything bigger, but since you might not have Photoshop, we're just going to try to do everything in Painter. So what we'll do is we'll go to we'll go to Canvas and we'll go to Resize. And we want to make this whole thing bigger. Now we want to make it about the size that we're going to print it at. So I'm going to set the resolution first, and I recommend that you do that also. I'm going to set it to 150, and we don't have to make this a really big painting. I usually do like 18 by 24, but in this case I'm going to make it smaller. Let's just do an 8 by 10. So I'm going to do 8 inches wide. Whoops. Oh, I see we need to uncheck this constrain file size box. Let's try this again. Alright. Well, this will work. Let's just do 11 by 11. It wants to constrain it either way. There's nothing we can do about that. That's why I do this stuff in Photoshop, because it's such a pain to do in Painter. Either way, all we need to do is make our sketch bigger. Okay, so now everything's bigger, and it's big enough to print out if we wanted to. And you should be saving this periodically as we work. I'm going to do that. I'm going to take that advice and do a save as. I'm just going to save it to my desktop. And we want to save it as a RIF format. You could also save it as a PSD if you want, if you're going to use Photoshop. So we've got our sketch, and I've got my reference image pulled up on the other screen here. And we can go ahead and start painting. So we've got our sketch, we've got our reference. We can go ahead and just delete this reference layer now, so we're not going to need it anymore. Now we're going to work entirely from this, and if you have your reference image to look at, then you can use that to just help you figure out where to put everything. So first of all, sometimes when I paint faces, I like to use a lot of layers, but in this case, I'm going to show you something that you can do a little faster. So we'll use some layers, but we're not going to break it down into as many layers as I normally would. It's going to kind of be a minimal thing. So it's going to end up looking a lot more painterly. And the point of that is, like, when you're doing portraits for people, you want them to look more like a painting and a lot less digital. And then on top of that, like, you want to be able to do it pretty quickly so that you can make them affordable for people, you know. I mean, it's one thing to, you know, for a person now and then to buy a really expensive portrait, but it would be better if you could make your portraits more accessible to everybody and make them more cost effective by being able to make them faster. And a lot of that will come from experience. So first thing we'll do is we will make a new layer, and let's turn down our sketch a little bit. So we got to figure out what we want our color to be for our background. I'm not really going to worry too much about doing a crazy background color, so maybe I'll just do something like what's in the photo, something like this. So I'm going to quickly just block in some of these areas here. A lot of this is just going to be, it's going to start out really rough, and then it's going to get refined over time. We also need to move our sketch above everything. Maybe we'll turn it up a little bit more, and we need to make it a multiply layer. Now we can see it better. Something like that. And then we'll use a digital airbrush. You can kind of use pretty much whatever brushes you want, and you can go for whatever style you want. Like if you want to make it, you know, more impressionistic or more expressionistic, and you want to use wacky colors, you can do whatever you want there. And I'm going to kind of do that here and there a little bit just to kind of show you what you can do. I'm just kind of adding colors, just not really purposefully, but just kind of whatever colors I feel like picking here. And it's good to establish where your light is first. And this, you want to use whatever the lighting is in your photo, unless you want to, you know, try to change that. I think in this photo my lighting's a little bit, I think it's pretty central actually, so it's more or less coming from this side though. So we got something like that, and now let's start blocking in some of the other colors here. I'm going to make my hair color maybe like this. I think we might need to be a little, try to be a little more accurate here with this. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to refine all this stuff. So we got the hair. The skin tone is something about like that maybe. It works good to use this, I'm using the scratchboard tool because it makes a nice smooth thick brush stroke, so it's really easy to fill stuff in quickly and not have to worry about any kind of problems. There we go. And then just to save time, I think I'm going to make my outfit here pretty simple. So I'm not going to like add any kind of pattern or any detail or anything. I'll just make it look like it's maybe a sweatshirt. I made a little accidental line there. That's okay. I'm not going to worry about that. This is going to end up... We want this to look more like a traditional painting, so it's going to need some flaws and some mistakes. So I recommend not using undo a lot in this. Just move forward and try not to move backward. Using Alt on my keyboard to sample my hair color there and putting more of that in. See in my reference photo that I need some more sideburns down the side here. We can zoom out a little bit and see what we got. Okay, I'll work for all that. We're going to smudge some of this around a little bit using the coarse oily blender. And you're going to want some paper texture here, so we'll get something like this. We'll just in a couple of places blend some of the background to break it up a little bit. We're going to blend more of it later. And then we'll zoom in a little bit on the hair. Begin getting the edge looking the way we want it. Want it to look kind of smudgy for now, because again, like I said, we're going to refine it more later. Something like this. And then for the skin, it's a really easy way to clean this edge up here. Use the pinch tool for that. I'm going to zoom in so you can see what I'm doing a little better. With the pinch tool, we can pinch pixels together. Imagine that this brush is your fingers right now, and you're pinching along the edge. Whatever's in between your fingers is going to get compressed together. So that's what the pinch brush is doing here. I'm moving my brush along the edge that I'm trying to refine. So I'm kind of guiding it into the shape that I want. So we got the side of the head. This needs to come in more and meet there. Neck, fix that a little bit. And I'm again looking back and forth at my reference photo here. You should be doing the same as you're doing this. If it helps, you can kind of pause this video and start and stop it just to kind of see what I'm doing incrementally here, because I know it's going to be a lot to follow. You can use the Distorto tool. All these distortion tools are under the FX menu if you don't know where to find them. Fix my head there a little bit. This just lets you push and pull the pixels around. And you don't want to get too nitpicky. I have a habit of doing that. There's kind of no point in doing that yet, so I'm going to stop. That'll work. If this thread thing is bothering me, it's probably didn't happen in yours, so I'm going to get rid of it just by blending it out a little bit. I'm going to blend some of this stuff too. I think the ear needs a little bit of refining. Oops. If you're wondering what these keyboard shortcuts I'm using are, I'm using tab to make the palettes go away sometimes. I'm using space, holding space on my keyboard to tap and move the page around. And I'm using Control and Alt on my keyboard and then tapping and dragging to resize my brush on the fly. So you can see that circle is defining the diameter of the brush. I recommend getting good at that because it'll allow you to paint a lot faster. Okay, Let's make a new layer now. Usually I'll name these layers, but I'm not going to in this case. Well, actually, maybe I will. Make it easier for you. I'm going to call this base. I'm going to call this dark. So the reason why I did this way, I wanted to just kind of quickly block in a few areas on this base layer. I just want to throw in kind of the background to establish that, and then the skin's kind of all in one area. The shirt's going to be all kind of the same, and the hair, of course. So I kind of broke these things up into the three main components. Now I'm going to make another component, which is going to be the dark. So I'm going to look at my photo, and I'm going to try to find all the absolute darkest places and start with the darkest color there. So in my photo, if you want to see what I'm working with here, I am going for like the nostrils, the crease of the mouth, the pupils. The hair's already there, so that's the other dark place, but those areas, and then maybe the eyelids and the eyelashes. So I'm going to fill those in first, and we're going to make the dark layer a multiply blend mode, and the color we're going to use is going to kind of depend on what we're filling in here. So for the nostrils, maybe we'll use something like this. I'm going to use the detail oils brush for this so I can get in kind of tight. Fill in some nostrils. And then lightly, anywhere there's some shadows, indicate them, but don't do anything too dark as far as the shadows go. Because we're gonna blend a lot of these together. So we don't want to make it look like line art. You know, I'm not gonna like draw in my nose like this and do my mouth like that. I want everything to kind of look more natural and more blended together. So that's why I'm kind of being sketchy and kind of scribbly about it in some places. This is all pretty dark, so I'm going to indicate that a little bit. You can feel free to change this too. Like if you don't like the position the eyes are in, or if there's something wrong with the photo, the person's not smiling or something, you can change all that. I would recommend, depending on how drastic of the change, that maybe you just kind of paint it. You know, if it's the mouth, maybe you just paint it as is, and then later after you're done, you can kind of smudge the corner up or something to make them look like they're smiling. I guess you'll kind of have to decide how to do that based on what you want to change, but it gives you an idea of, you know, that you can change stuff like that after the fact. Probably won't keep most of this sketch, so if we do keep any of it, it's going to end up really subdued into the background, so it's kind of why I'm going over some of these lines that I already kind of sketched in again. So a lot of this takes practice. You just have to be able to look at stuff and kind of know where to put it. And I know it still kind of seems like we're tracing here, but I mean, look at what we got. It hasn't really helped much. You know, I look like a frogman or something with pink skin. So it's still going to take a lot of work. I mean, this is going to be a pretty long video here, so hopefully you're ready to work on this a lot, or if not, you can always come back to it and watch the rest of it. But anyhow, I think that we don't need our sketch anymore, so yeah, there's really nothing else on there that we need to keep. Maybe I'll sketch in a little bit more of this nose so I don't forget to put it in. Okay. So the sketch we can just get rid of. Zoom out and take a look. It's looking okay. So those are kind of the sharper contrast facial areas. We'll add another layer. dark tint. That'll also be a multiply layer. Do a lot of tinting in this technique. So we'll take kind of a color that we're going to use for our shadow here. And in my example, let's use a lower opacity. Let's make sure that your airbrush, oh, I was using the detail was, that's why it didn't work. You want to be using the digital airbrush for this tinting, and you want the opacity to be 9 so that we get a nice soft tint. And again, in my photo, my lights, or my shadows are all kind of really on the left side. I guess the light's kind of coming down here from the top right, so ever so slightly. So we'll go ahead and start adding in some shadow area here. I want to pay attention to what color the shadows are too. Like I see on my face up here in my photo, they're pretty orange, but when they get down towards my neck, they start to get more purple or blue. So I need to make sure that I do that as well. And adding color to your skin and to your paintings, like colors that you wouldn't normally think would be there, like my skin's not blue, but the shadow's blue in the photo, so you have to really pay close attention to the stuff like that. And one of my friends pointed out, she does a lot of oil paintings that the portraits I used to do and the artwork that I used to do didn't really have any color, because I wouldn't, I would just think about things two-dimensionally in a way, color-wise, and then just paint them the color that I think that they are, or that I perceive them as being, but not really what color they actually are, and the colors that you think you're seeing might not actually be the color that's actually there. Most color is perceptual and is influenced by colors that are around it. So just kind of going around my photo and hunting by eye and looking for just these dark areas. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of trying, this might be harder for you to do if you haven't done it before, and I'll give you some example here. I'm trying to ignore everything else in the photo, and I'm looking around and I'm looking for certain dark areas. So in my photo here, I'm looking, here's all these kind of orangey brown colors. So where are all those at? I'm ignoring everything else. I don't care about the eyes, that's too light, everything else doesn't matter. I'm just visually trying to identify where these shadow areas are and then fill them in appropriately. So areas like, here around the eyes and so on. So I'm just going to keep, oops, we need the airbrush for that. I'm going to keep filling in. So shadow under the nose, of course. And sometimes you get better at this because once you shade a lot of faces and you get used to how lighting works, you're going to know where to put most of these shadows. And like I mentioned earlier, I am going to change this, so I'm not going to make it an exact duplicate of the photo. I might change the lighting towards the end, but for now I want it to be pretty accurate as to how it was, or how it is in the photo. So anywhere that you see that you need these shadows, you can put them in. We're going to build it up gradually like this. Need some more sideburn going down. Sometimes you have to look at different things too. In my photo I noticed that my bottom of my ear aligns with my sideburn, and it's those alignment things that help kind of towards the end too. I mean, most of our alignment should be fine because we used our sketch, but if you're drawing without a sketch, it gets a little harder. Something like that. And you'll notice I'm not really using black here. Like, this isn't black. It looks black to you, but if you look right here in our color picker, it's just a really dark brown. Same thing with this. This is a dark blue. So I'm not using black here, and I recommend that you don't either, because the black that Painter has isn't really a very natural black. It's not the kind of black that you'd see in like paint pigments. When we do a lot of blending later, it'll just look a lot cooler if we don't use it. So I don't really want to tell you what to do. If you want to use black, you can use it, but it's a suggestion to not use it. Take some of this darker blue-purple color. shade in where the eyes are. I'll be going a little too heavy on these shadows, but that's okay because I can dull them down a little bit too. Like we can play with the opacity of this layer. Oops. Of this layer. And then we can get different results. So for now I'm going to keep them pretty dark like this. And a little bit on the mouth here. There's some shadow. Kind of underneath my chin. Sometimes you have to do things too, especially when, I mean, you don't have to do them, but when you're doing portraits, sometimes people want you to fix things, like their neck or something, or maybe they have some weird creases. I'm using some gray here. Gray's good to use sometimes too, you know, I mean, it depends on what kind of color you're going for. But I find it helps. Gray is one of those colors that it's kind of like a chameleon in a way. If you put it next to other colors, it can kind of change perceptually, and what you see might make the gray look like an entirely different color. You gotta think a lot about what the contours of the face are too. Like if you know, if you've done some anatomy drawing and you know where the contours of the skull are, it'll make this a lot easier to do. You can see it's kind of starting to come together now. Just got to find all of these spots where the shadows are and just fill them in. Zoom out a little bit. It's good to gradually or periodically zoom out and see what you got. And again, still doesn't look anything like a face yet, but we'll get there. Okay. I'm going to use white since we're on a multiply layer. We can, in some places, subtract from what we put down here if we need to, anywhere that we need to do it. It's good to do rim highlights along the face. We don't really have to worry about erasing all this background stuff, but so if we erase some of it there, kind of gives us a little bit of a highlight along the neck. Something like that. Okay. That's looking better. Let's fill in some of the eye color. My eyes are kind of blue and yellow and green and lots of different colors, but in this photo they just look kind of dark gray, so I can go through and enhance that later if I want, but for now I'm just gonna fill it in like that. Add some life to the eyes there by putting in some of that purple. And then let's make a new layer. Let's call it tint 2. The reason why I do these different layers, I'm only doing ones that are necessary on different layers. Like, it's nice to break it down that way. If I decided I didn't like this tint that we put down, I could always just change that and then I don't have to repaint anything else. So they're kind of like safety layers, I guess. So we got the tint 2. Let's try using some of this yellow in here. We'll make it a multiply blend mode again. Most of the time when we're tinting, it'll be a multiply blend mode. And just look through your photo, and anywhere you think you see yellow tones, put in some yellow. And I'm kind of, again, looking at my photo and trying to ignore every other color in it except for that yellow, and anywhere I see that yellow, I'm trying to match up on my painting to that point. And we could do the same thing with like pink. There's usually a lot of pink around the eyes and the nose and the mouth. And this is where I'm just going to kind of start to get creative with the colors too. Like if I decide I don't want it to be exactly like it is in the painting and I want to enhance it, that's where I'm going to do it. We need some blue or some purple or something in here too. That would look pretty good. Side of the nose especially. Underneath. And the crease there, and then parts of the lips. Might be taking you a little longer to make these decisions than me, but I've been doing a lot of these paintings, and this is a fun thing to do. You know, it's a good way to get people interested in your work. If you have a Facebook page, you know, you could do something like ask your friends, you know, to send you some photos, and then offer to paint their photos for free. You know, and then out of that, you might get some gigs to do some paid portraits and things. Okay, so this tinting is obviously too strong, so I'm going to back it down a little. Let's do the same thing with the layer underneath. We get something that we want. That's a good balance. And we can keep refining these too as we go along to get them looking the way we want. Eventually, we'll merge all these layers together into a single layer, and then we'll do a lot of smudging and blending, and still got a ways to go here. Okay, let's do a new layer. Let's call it HL. This will be some highlights. Let's call it light, actually. I don't call highlight something else. So for our light area, let's keep using our airbrush. And we'll sample using Alt on our keyboard one of these lighter areas on our head. And we'll pick a lighter skin color here. Now we'll go through and we'll start picking out where the highlighted areas are. So again, I'm looking at my photo, and I'm trying to only paint in these areas, and I'm also kind of trying to do it logically. Like I'm trying to think about what these forms are naturally. You know, obviously the nose sticks out more on the end, and then the nostrils kind of stick out a little bit. Sometimes you're surprised at where some of these highlights are. They're not where you think they would be based, you know, by looking at your photo. Like I always think about under the lips as a kind of a shadow area, but you know, sometimes there's a highlight under there. It depends on where the light's coming from. I'm kind of just looking back and forth, and that's why it really helps to have these two monitors, or to have something like a iPad to be able to have your reference image on one screen and then paint on the other. A lot of just hunting and pecking here, trying to find these spots. And then try not to get into it too close there, because you do want to zoom out. See, this looks kind of cool just on its own. Like you could, you know, you can stop at any point. If you want it to look more, you know, impressionistic or something. I don't think it looks exactly like me, but it does look kind of cool. It's got some kind of sinister character going with it. Let's see, there's some highlight down here. And then there's not as much of this in the photo, but I like to put these rim highlights in, so I'm going to add these in more than they are in the actual photo. And we could even start putting some highlights on the hair too. I won't really worry too much about hair. I'll try to show you some, but I might have to end up doing another video on like longer hair because it's pretty complicated. It'd take its own video to really show you how to do really realistic hair. A lot of the hair color in this case, since my hair is dark, it's just reflecting what's around it, which is this background color. So if you made your background color like green or something, you would want to put some green in your hair. Like over here, there's kind of this little purplish tint that I threw in. I'll throw in some of that over here. It's pretty subtle, like you probably won't really notice it, but it'll really make the hair come together. Something like that. Now, I think it's pretty safe at this point to maybe start blending some of this stuff together. So let's take all of our layers here that we have, including the base layer. Actually, it'll be easier just to do a drop all. Let's do canvas, or I'm sorry, layers, drop all. That'll flatten everything down to one layer. Do a little bit of blending here with the diffuse blur blender. And we want to make sure that we keep areas of sharp contrast that need to be kept. So you need to start looking at sharp and soft contrast. What I mean by sharp is like, you know, the crease of the lips is going to be sharp, but this crease in the side of my mouth isn't going to be as sharp. It's going to be smooth, so I need to smooth it appropriately. So don't overblend stuff. Like if I overblend this, it goes away. It's not there anymore. So I need to have the right amount of blending going on here. And again, I'm using my reference photo for that. There's ways that we can we can sharpen some of these edges too after we make them, and we'll be doing that. So don't worry about it too much if you can't get it perfect. See, like this doesn't need to be that dark, so in this case I am going to overblend it to where it goes away because it just needs to be subtle, this crease here. And same thing with my chin crease, that doesn't need to be so dark. And this stuff doesn't need to be so dark under here. So kind of just balancing out the hard and soft contrast in the painting. As I mentioned, the lips do need to be pretty tight, so we don't want to destroy that. The nostrils are pretty sharp too, so don't want to blend them too much. This stuff we can blend in, and of course the eyebrows. Still need to be able to see where they're going to be, so don't destroy them. Under the eye, that's more faint. Eyelids are usually pretty sharp. I'm going to fix them a little bit. Sharpest areas are usually the eyes, the nostrils, and the lips, and then parts of the ears. Everything else is generally pretty smooth. Blend some of the hair here. Sometimes it's good to blend in the direction that the hair is flowing, like I'm doing it kind of radially like this, so that it looks like the hairs are individually coming out of my scalp. Seeing now that this is closer that this sideburn needs to be darker, so I'm going to go in and darken it more, fix it up a little bit, and we'll go back to blending. Okay. Blend some of this shirt so it's not such a smooth edge, or such a hard edge. It's one of the more important things is that your edges aren't too hard in this style. I do paint some faces where my edges are harder, but you know, that's a different style of painting altogether. Okay. Nostrils are a little too dark, so I'm going to sample one of these lighter colors here, and I'm going to lighten them just a little bit with the airbrush. Something like that. We'll zoom out and see how we're looking. It's looking better. We're going to do some more blending here. Let's use the coarse oily blender a little bit to do some blending. Now here we can establish some contours using the direction that we blend and pull everything. So try to do that, like see how I'm contouring on the face here. Maybe not quite like that, but maybe something more like this. This kind of breaks up the skin tone a little bit too and helps it to look more natural. And then the neck, we'll do a little bit. So do you see what I mean by contours? You have to imagine the flow of the skin. You know, if I had something wrapped around my neck right now, I know that's a disturbing concept, but if it was, you know, it would curve, you know, kind of around like that. So if it was wrapped around my face, it would go, would fall on my cheek, and then it would come in, and then it would wrap around my nose, and it would come back, and you know, like how sunglasses would. So that's how your contours have to be. If I was wearing a bandana, it would contour like that. See how the contours of all of my blending lines are doing that? That's what I want you to do too when you're blending. But you got to try not to wreck things, you know, like I don't want to wreck this thing I did on my chin because I need that, and I obviously don't want to wreck my lips like that, and you know, this crease here I want to try to keep that, so you need to be careful where you put these things. And then we'll use the diffuse blur again to blend some more. We want to keep some of this texture that we added. So in some places I'm blending hard, and some places I'm blending soft. You can see that really makes the skin look nice now and more realistic and less flat. Really the trick here is just to be patient and spend a lot of time on this and just keep looking at your reference photo, and sometimes you have to sit back, like I'll quit working on a piece and leave it on my screen and go sit across the room and just look at it from a distance and just stare at it for, you know, like 15 or 30 minutes. Sometimes it takes a couple of times of doing that. I'll turn on my side and look at it sideways, and then look at it the other way, and look at my reference photo next to it, and then look back and forth, and you just kind of have to do a lot of that to be able to make the observations that are required to make a portrait look like somebody, you know. So there's what we got so far. Need to do some more blending here on the lips. Down there on the eye. So having said that, now we need to do some more refining. I'm going to add some more highlights. We'll do that on a new layer. Let's make that a screen layer. I'm going to pick a highlight color here. Throw in some of these brighter highlights where they would be. Especially on the eyes. They always need good highlights. A good way to make your eyes look more realistic is to make them look wet. But you don't want them to be white, like pure white. I mean, you could, it's an effect you could use, but eyes aren't generally pure white. They're usually, actually, believe it or not, pretty close to your skin color. I'm going to go back to this canvas layer, and I need to draw in, now that I see up close, I need to draw in some tear ducts. So I'm going to do that. This is probably a detail that's going to be too small to notice if we print this, but I want it to be there, so I'm going to put it in. I think they're a little too extreme. I'm going to fix it just a bit. There we go. That's better. So continuing with our highlights. So I'm going to rename that so that you know what it is. Just kind of looking for some places to put these. Trying to find the right color also. Sometimes that's a little tricky. There we go. When you're using this screen blend mode, it makes it a little more complicated because what you see is not what you get when you're picking the color. I'll shift this towards pink to do the highlights on the lips. I'm trying to find a good color for the nose. I think I just need to go back to the canvas layer and put it in. Feeling like I need an orange or something over here. There we go. That's the color I need. Zooming out. Still looking pretty weird, but interesting nonetheless. Okay, let's go ahead and drop all again. Do a layer, drop all. So I'm only keeping these layers as long as I need them, and then after that I'm just kind of ditching them. And then blending. So it's kind of at this point adding and then deciding if you like it, and then if you do like it, keeping it and blending it. I see that my nostril needs a little bit more work here. Then of course some blending. See if that looks better. I don't know if that really helped actually. I think it needs to be adjusted a little bit more. These nostrils are tricky business here. I think that'll work a little bit. I have a habit of drawing things the way I want to see them sometimes, and that's not really how it looks in the photo, so gotta watch out for that. That's better. Just kind of supplementing some of this stuff here, cleaning up some of these areas that I don't like. Okay. Let's do some more refining to these edges using the pinch brush tool. So I'm going through and I'm sharpening contrast now where it needs to be sharpened. Be careful not to do it anywhere that doesn't need it. This is what I meant earlier about how if you go too far blending, you can kind of get some sharpness back. It's this balance of smooth contrast and sharp contrast that's going to make your piece really stand out and look really interesting. Pinch tool is really cool though. I don't know if anybody else really uses it in this way, but now you know how to use it for more than just a novelty. Still not happy with these nostrils. I'm going to use the blur brush here, where they're just too sharp. That's what it is. It's better. And again, zooming out to see how things look. Forehead seems kind of dark. Let's lighten that a little bit. You can see I don't really like to use like color palettes or swatches. I just kind of, I'll put down color and then just sample it. Here on the photo, my forehead's not quite as light here, but I'm going to make it lighter because I want it to be that way in my painting. So I'm going to start finding some areas like that that I want to change. So I feel that it enhances the photo. Especially there on the neck. There. Make that nostril stick out more. Something needs to happen on this other one too to make it look a little bit better. Not sure what. Maybe it's something like that that it needs. There we go, that's helping. Zooming in and out a lot. It's very important to do. The reason why is if you look at it too close, you end up focusing on details that you're not normally going to see when you print it out. You know, when we print this thing out, it might only be this big, or it might, you know, be slightly bigger. Because it's only going to be an 8 by 10, so looking at it this close doesn't really do any good. as far as gauging its, how complete it is. The smaller the better. I mean, even something like that, that looks pretty realistic, except for the background being messed up. I think it looks pretty good. But you get closer and it doesn't look realistic at all, so it takes a little refining. I don't know why. I guess I feel like fixing this background too here and smoothing it out. There, that helps it look a little more finished here. Let's do some work on the hair too, because I feel like the face is really coming together, but we're not really doing much to the hair. So after I finish this here, which I forgot, let's do that. So I notice in my photo that my hairline's kind of more like this. Here, and the hair doesn't stick out so much. So I'm going to fix that. Looks better. And then there's a little more up there too. Okay, so first thing we can do is use the coarse oily blender to start shaping the hair. My hair is kind of going, it's kind of coming up from here, and I have it kind of combed back. So you need to be thinking about the direction that the hair is flowing. So it's coming out of your scalp, and then it's going in a direction. Like this hair is going up and around like that. It's not going straight up. It's got a curve to it, and you have to account for that when you're doing hair. So I kind of, when I'm doing my brush strokes, I'm kind of brushing with the direction of the hair. Imagine if you're like combing your hair or something. You really have to pay attention to that stuff. And this works much better if you have this paper texture. So if your settings aren't what I have here, you might not be able to get the effects that I'm getting, so you need to ensure that your settings are all the same. I know this is like really easy hair to do because it's just slicked back, but again, as I mentioned, I'll show you some more complicated videos on hair. Okay, something like that. And then what we need to do is we need to make another layer for some flyaway hair. And the flyaway hair, I guess I just call it that because it's like the little hairs that always stick up, no matter how hard you try to comb your hair, there's always something. So we'll draw some of those using the detail oils brush for this. Maybe we'll use a little bit higher of an opacity. Let's use 19. I don't want to go too high. What I'm trying to do is just indicate some hairs to make them not look so clumpy. Maybe we'll use a slightly more opaque brush, like 29. That's working a little bit better. You gotta draw in all these little follicles here. Some of this will blur so we don't have to get too crazy with it. The more of these little hair things you do, the more realistic your hair is gonna look. But you gotta, put them in the right places though. I don't know about that one. Okay, something like that. It's better looking hair. Some of these I think are too long, so I'm gonna give myself a haircut here, cut off some of these. And I think I don't like all of these. I went a little too nuts on that, maybe. Just showing you some examples. That's better. Okay. I need some eyebrows now so that I don't look like somebody shaved them off as a bad prank. So we'll make a new layer, call it brows, and we will make this a multiply blend mode, and let's just use a gray color like this. My eyebrows aren't very thick, so if I draw them in too thick, it's not going to look like me. So what I want to do is I want to put in kind of the shadow area that they cast, like this. And again, if you want to change these eyebrows to make somebody have a different expression, you can do that. So I'm just trying to draw in where actually that shadow is, and then we will zoom in a little bit. The eyebrows are a lot like the hair. I'm going to make an extra layer for this in case I mess it up. They're just like the hair, where if you don't draw them in the right direction, in the right way, they're not going to look like eyebrows. Like if I just go like this and draw in my eyebrows, it's going to look like a cartoon, you know. It's not going to look right. So your eyebrows, you kind of have to almost draw each hair. I mean, not all of them, but you know, a lot of them. So we use a small brush here, not too small, and we'll just start drawing in some hairs. Now again, you have to probably look at some eyebrows to get a feel of how these are supposed to go, but you know, you've got eyebrows hopefully that you can look at in the mirror, and that should make it pretty easy to do. And then you have to know which direction the hairs go and all that stuff. Now again, mine aren't very thick. Probably drawing them in thicker than they actually are. The point is, you have to do it this way. There's kind of not really a shortcut to doing this if you want them to look natural. And men and women have different eyebrows. Men's are usually a bit thicker and less well groomed, and women's are usually thinner and a little bit darker because some women draw their eyebrows in. Some men do too, but it's all stuff you have to consider. Okay, I've got something like that. Now again, that's probably too thick compared to how my eyebrows really are, so I need to knock it back just a little. So I'm going to use white with preserved transparency turned on. I'm going to go over that and kind of subdue it a little bit. Same thing with that brows layer underneath. Something like that. And then let's just flatten all these layers now together. We'll do a layers drop all. I'm going to go in with this diffuse blur and lightly blend them a little bit so that the hairs aren't so distinct. And there you go, you've got some brows. I think they're still a bit too distinct over here compared to how they are in the photo. I want this to look more natural, so I'm going to subdue this some more in the places where it isn't so distinct in the photo. Like again, I mentioned I have a habit of drawing things as I see them rather than how they actually are in the photo, so that's kind of how they look more in the photo. Looks more natural. Also see I'm missing a little bit of a shadow here that I need to indicate more. That's better. Okay, we're making some good progress here. Just kind of looking at it from a distance and thinking about what to do next. Let's do some more blending. Sometimes you're working on this and you're focused on other things, and then you see stuff that you meant to fix. I think I kind of have attention deficit disorder or something, so I tend to jump around a lot. Hopefully that's not too hard to follow in this video. Again, as I mentioned, some of these, like the nostrils and stuff, and the lips and the eyes, you want to keep pretty sharp. Okay. I'm going to start using the blur brush here. What will make your portraits look more interesting, I think, and you don't have to do this, but I recommend you do it, is if you can make it look like somebody took your picture with a camera. So in real life, and when you take a photograph, there's a focal distance, so what's not in focus is blurrier and what is in focus is sharper. So you can accomplish this effect with your paintings too by blurring some of the edges. So I'm going to use the blur brush, and for instance, all my shirt down here I'm going to blur because it's just going to be in the background and it's not going to be in focus anyways. And then I'm going to blur the edges of my ears and my neck because I want and my hair, because I want my focus to be on my face. And it has kind of a, I guess, it's a multi-purpose thing. For one, it's going to make your painting look better and more like it's, you know, been photographed or something. And for two, it's going to hide some of the imperfections on the edges. So that can be good too. Like the hair, you don't have to really stress about too much because it's kind of, you know, been blurred together a little bit. And you could go into the face a little bit and blur around like that. Realize I didn't do much work on the ears, so I need to go and, before I blur it too much, do some work on it to make it look more realistic. Didn't do any pinching on it, that's why. Isn't this pinch brush great? Just get in there and get it done. I think that's probably good enough for the ear because it's going to be in the background. Go through with the blur brush and blur it. Okay, it's coming together. When I'm doing these paintings, I use Photoshop a lot, and I go back and forth, and in this case I'm not, so there's some things in my finished portraits that I might not be able to do in this tutorial, but you can go and take a look at my work on my website and get a feel for what something looks like that I've spent a lot of time on. I'm probably going to end up ending this tutorial sooner than later because, you know, I could spend, you know, lots of hours working on this, and you probably don't want to sit through like a 6-hour video to learn this technique. So I do offer one-on-one lessons remotely through screen sharing programs, and if you're interested in, you know, getting some one-on-one help with this technique, I can guide you through it. It's just like having a lesson in person. I can see what's on your screen and you can see what's on mine. It's pretty fun. And I'm kind of fixing some of this stuff in places where I feel like it needs to be fixed. Needs to be more of a crease going on here. I think we need a darker color too. Something like that. Throwing a little bit of highlight on the lip too. That's not really in the photo, but I like to add it, so I'm gonna do that. Sometimes you end up, like the lips are another thing. If you don't want it to look like lipstick, what you have to do is you have to blend in some of the skin color with the lips. Again, that's another thing that I have a habit of painting in the way I see it and not actually the way that it is. Okay, it's looking better. Add a new layer. Let's give some life to this thing. I'm gonna add a multiply layer. I'm gonna use blue. And let's give it a little bit of character here. Add a glaze to it, or a tint. This is what I was talking about earlier about adding in stuff that's not there and changing the color and just making it a little more interesting. Tints and glazes, or whatever you want to call them. It's a good way to do it. And then we'll just back it down a little bit, so it doesn't need to be too intense. Something like that. And then we'll do layers, drop all, if we're satisfied with that. And I see that over here, this is a little bit too distinct. So I'll just fix that a little bit. And then I'm going to add another layer, call it HL for highlights. I think I'm getting pretty close to being finished with this tutorial. You know, again, I could spend more time on this, and you should spend more time on your pieces too. This kind of gives you an idea of how to get started, and you know, you can go through and finish it and get it looking exactly how you want it to. It's going to have those highlights. You don't want too much though. You want these really bright highlights to be pretty subtle. Helps to blend them a little bit too sometimes. Oops, if you can actually get the thing to work. There we go. Okay. Let's add some final texture to this. Again, you know, spend more time getting this to look the way you want it and getting all the shading and everything perfect before you do this texture. I'm going to kind of stop a little early on this. This looks pretty good for having only spent a little over an hour on it. You know, it usually takes me at least 4 to 8 hours to do a painting and I work pretty fast, so. So for the texture, let's put that below this highlight layer, because we don't want texture over our highlights, and we'll make a new layer, and we'll call it text. So this will give our skin some texture. We'll use the sponge for this. Now, texture is what? It's freckles, it's blemishes, it's skin cells, it's the veins underneath your skin, it's all of these things. So that's pretty much what you just need to draw in. So we have some blue veins in our face, so we'll, whoops, needs to be a multiply blend mode. We'll tap in some blue here. I'm gonna try to stay on the face, because otherwise you're just gonna have to erase it from the background. We'll try some red, a couple spots. We'll take down the opacity of that layer a little bit, and then let's just go through and let's use our eraser to erase anywhere that that texture painted off of the face onto anywhere else. Doesn't have to be perfect, just make sure you get everything that isn't on the skin. And keep taking down the opacity until you get something that you like that. So you want it to be subtle, and you can see if I zoom in close, there you go, you got some really cool vessels in the face. Now that doesn't need to be everywhere, and you should blend it a little too, so we'll use the diffuse blur for that. Follow the contours and blend lightly. So I'm following the contours of the skin, and very, very, very lightly, as light as you can blend, blending this, because if you don't and you blend too hard, it goes away. We don't want it to go away, we just want it to naturally blend into the skin here. Okay. Let's add another texture layer. It's going to be some texture for the background, maybe. Just to kind of make it look more real. I keep forgetting to set these blend modes to multiply. And again, use your eraser to just erase whatever's not where it's supposed to be. Take down the opacity and blend it ever so lightly into the background. So now it's going to look like there's a wall or something maybe behind me. It won't just be flat. Okay. We can further unify the composition by adding some lighting effects. So add a new layer. Let's call this vignette. You can pick a vignette color. I'm going to do something extreme like this just to show how we can really, keep forgetting to do it multiply, show how we can really change the image here and the tonality of it if you wanted to. Gotta still think about the face as a three-dimensional object, so you want to try to keep your lights on the side that they're supposed to be on. Something like that. I don't know why I called that vignette. That's actually more of a tint. I meant to do a vignette, so then I thought the tint looked cool. So let's do an actual vignette. What a vignette is it's just a dark area around the outside of the canvas here, like this. And that'll kind of make it look more like a portrait and bring more of the focus in towards the center. You can have it be as dark as you want. Okay. One last thing I think we can do. Let's make a layer called HL2 just for highlights. Some more highlights here. I'm going to pick kind of a light color like this. Use the square chalk. And we'll turn the paper texture and contrast up all the way, and let's see what we get here. I think we want something more like this. So this is going to be some kind of shiny, oily spots on the skin. You don't want to do too many of them. You kind of only want them to be where they should be. And then we'll use the sponge. Set the blend mode to screen for that. And we'll use black with the sponge to tap over it, and using black with the sponge over a screen layer will remove or conceal the white pixels. So if I set it to a normal blend mode, you'll see I've added black and white, but when it's set to screen, you can only see the white. The black covers up the white. So we get something like that. And then we can turn down the opacity just a little bit. And then of course we need to blend it too, lightly, following the contours. This is something that you want to be pretty subtle. Look at it from a distance. And then finally, the very last thing we'll do, because this video is getting really long, let's add blemishes. Because people have freckles and acne and all kinds of stuff. And you know what? You don't have to put it in there, but I'm showing you how you can make some realistic stuff here, and that's all part of it. So we'll turn color variability down really low. It doesn't even have to be on. Set the blend mode to multiply. And I'm going to use a pepper spray brush, which is in the airbrushes category. Make sure the settings are what I have up here. And then try to keep this on your skin. Put in some freckles and dots. You can keep changing your feature size if you want, but you probably want to keep it pretty small. I don't really have a whole lot of freckles, but I have some, so I'm going to put some in there. And if you feel like you've done too much, again, you can go with the sponge and use white to kind of erase some of it. We don't want there to be any on our eyes, so we want to make sure that we don't get any freckles in our eyes. Probably on our lips we shouldn't have any either, but everywhere else is cool. Maybe not in our nostrils. Definitely not on our shirt or in our hair. So there's freckles there. Now let's blend them a little bit, like we've been doing with everything else, following the contours of the body. And this is one of those things where, like, if you are painting someone that has freckles, you probably want to find the bigger ones and draw those in manually. But everything else, just kind of splatter them in, because, you know, no one's going to really notice whether or not you got them in the right spot. I don't think anybody pays that much attention to freckles. So, there you go. There's a quick painting of my face. I'll probably continue working on this, and then when it's finished, I'll post a link on the video here that you can look at to see the finished piece, so that you can see what it's supposed to look like as I make more progress. This gives you an idea of where to start, and when you're done, you can just drop it all to a layer, get it looking how you want. I see down here I kind of messed up the neck, but that's okay, I fixed that. And save it as a riff or a PSD. Usually when I'm making these, I didn't for this video, but I save a lot more often than I did. I think I only saved once. I still haven't saved it yet. I should save it right now. Because if you don't, your computer could crash and things could happen. And when I save, I like to save iterative saves, so I'll save multiple copies of the same file. So I might have, in my average portrait, maybe 8 to 10 different saves, and they're all kind of, you know, the first save would be the sketch, and then the last save would be the finished piece, and everything in between would be just incremental saves that, you know, show the different progress of the piece. So I'll quit rambling and not make this video any longer than it is. Use some of these techniques to paint portraits of yourself or of your friends to get some practice, and then hopefully once you have some portfolio examples online, people will start hiring you to paint their portrait for money. Thanks for watching, and have fun with this.